Welcome. So I'm obviously outside today. I'm trying this new thing where I film my YouTube videos in an outdoor setting because it's summer and I live in Minnesota, and so summers are very precious here and I want to spend as much time outside as possible. And I just figured, why not switch up the environment, the location of my videos. So we're gonna try this out and see how it goes. I'm right by the lake that I live by, and there is a pavilion behind me where they do live music. So hopefully that doesn't get too loud or distract from what I want to talk about. It's been 2 months since I last filmed and posted a video, which is crazy. Time flies. Before that I was pretty consistent with it, and then I took a break because I've just been rethinking my whole content strategy and all of that. And so last month I went on a trip to Japan, and I was inspired by that to make a video about why I think women in particular should travel alone. Either travel alone or live alone. I feel like the experiences are somewhat similar in terms of what you learn and how you grow. So I went to Japan alone. It was a last minute decision. I'm so glad I did it. One of the best trips I've ever gone on. And while I was there, I was really in awe at the fact that I had done this and that I had chosen to travel across the world to a place I've never been to on my own, being someone who used to be very shy and reserved and scared and never would have in a million years considered doing something like this. So I was really inspired by myself and by the experience, and I realized along the way that I was encountering these situations that made me feel so capable and so empowered and so independent. And there's situations that I never really would have encountered in my day-to-day life had I not taken this solo trip, because in our day-to-day lives we tend to do the same things and be in the same environments and be fairly comfortable with the experiences that we encounter to a certain extent. But when you're traveling, everything is new, everything is different. You're completely out of your comfort zone. You're in a place that you most likely have never been to. The culture might be extremely different from what you're used to. The language might be different. So you're experiencing all these things that are out of your comfort zone. And I've done this throughout my entire life with other people because my mom is from Morocco. So I've been traveling to completely different parts of the world from the time I was a baby. But it's so different when you take that on alone and when you don't have someone there with you. Now there's a plane, which is actually fitting. It's so different when you don't have someone that you can go to and can figure out situations with, kind of rely on to a certain extent. It's so much less scary to navigate a new place when you're with someone else, because nothing feels as important, if that makes sense. Like I traveled around Europe with my brother last summer, and we went to several places that I've never been to before, but we were together, and so anything we encountered that was uncomfortable or something that we had to kind of figure out, I didn't feel overwhelmed by it because we were figuring it out together, and it just took a lot of the weight off my shoulders. But on this trip that I took to Japan, I had to figure every single thing out myself. So I had to make sure that I was at the right place in the airport. I had to make sure, once I got to Japan, that's when it was really like I had to make sure that I got on the right train, and I actually got on the wrong train when I first got there, and so I had to navigate that. I had to handle all of my luggage. Luckily I lift weights, so I'm strong, and that wasn't a problem. I had to figure out how to communicate with people who don't speak English at all and who speak a completely different language than me. I had to navigate figuring out where to eat because I have celiac disease and I'm very allergic to a lot of the food in Japan, and I didn't have someone with me to kind of be like, well, I did visit a friend there, so at times I did have someone to help me out with that. But for half of the trip, I was alone and I had to navigate that myself. I I consider myself more of an introverted person, kind of somewhere in the middle, but it doesn't come super naturally to me to like meet new people and make new friends. So I had to navigate that and like push myself out of my comfort zone and make the first move on introducing myself to a random person that I wanted to talk to. So there were all these different things that I encountered on this trip that really contributed to me growing as a person and to me becoming aware of how much I had already grown as a person before this trip. So it was a really powerful experience, not to mention it was so peaceful and spiritual to be in a really cool new part of the world completely alone. Like my sole focus, I see a bug crawling around my phone. I hope it doesn't crawl on my camera. My sole focus was to explore this new place and experience this culture and just take in everything around me visually, and also just, what am I trying to say? It was just very meditative because I had several days where I really just completely did my own thing. I would talk to people here and there, but for the most part I was just really in my own world, exploring these temples in Japan and taking in these beautiful sights, and it was really cool. I really enjoyed being alone in a completely new part of the world. So I was inspired on that trip to make this video because I think that traveling alone, maybe even more so than living alone, can be very daunting. Living alone can be daunting as well. That's something that I have never done, so I can't really speak to that. I think that if you're living alone in the same part of the world, the same place that you already have family and friends, that takes off probably some of the pressure. Like, it's still a daunting thing to do and you still encounter so many challenges. But I think the thing with traveling alone is that you are in a place where you know no one, or maybe you know one or two people, but you don't have like a community of people that can support you there. So you're very much having to rely on yourself to navigate this new place. And I know several women who, when I tell them that I did this and that I went on this trip, their reaction is kind of like, oh, I wish I could do that, or I don't know if I could ever do that. But I really think that everyone has it in them to take a trip like this alone, because trust me 2 years ago or 3 years ago would have said the exact same thing. I would have been like, I could never see myself doing that. That seems really scary. I would rather travel with someone. But we're so much more capable than we realize. And the thing with traveling alone is once you go, like once you're on the plane headed to your destination, there's no turning back. Like, you're already all in, you're already fully committed to taking this trip. So you're not really in a position where you have the flexibility to get really stressed and to wish you had someone with you. You kind of are just already in it alone. You're already on your way to the place, and so you're gonna have to navigate whatever comes your way. And that's really the mentality that I took on this trip, and it was really great because I didn't stress about anything. I knew I was gonna encounter difficult situations. I knew that I was gonna have to navigate things that I hadn't navigated in the past. I didn't even fully know what those things would be, but I knew that those times would come and it wasn't all just gonna be fun and carefree. But I was like, I'll figure it out. I have no other option but to figure it out, so why stress about it? I'll figure it out in the moment. And that's honestly a really good approach to take in life in general, and I'm trying to apply that to my life more because I just overthink things too much and it's really not necessary. But there was something about being on this trip already, being alone, like having no other around it. Like I had to figure out the situations that I encountered, and I did, and I was perfectly fine, and I had an amazing trip. So I highly recommend doing something like this. I'm not saying you have to go to Japan or do something crazy like that. Like you could start closer to home if that feels more realistic to you. Although I think going to a resort or somewhere relaxing like that, where the whole trip is just being in this place where you're catered to and everything is like enclosed and safe, that would be very nice and relaxing and is something that I would do. But I think for the purpose of what I'm talking about in this video, which is really like pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and forcing yourself to grow in these new ways and experience a side of yourself that you didn't even necessarily know existed, I think that a resort trip wouldn't really serve that purpose. I think it makes more sense, and it's better, I guess, in my opinion, to go somewhere where you're actually like going out into the world and experiencing this place that you're traveling to, and not things aren't like clear cut and planned out for you. Like you need to figure out what you're doing and navigate the space that you're in. And I do think that traveling to internationally is the main way to do that. I also wouldn't recommend just going anywhere in the world, especially if you are a woman. Unfortunately, we have to consider our safety, and not every place that you could visit alone would be the safest. Japan is one of the safest places for a woman to visit alone. I never felt unsafe on my trip. I felt fully confident and comfortable being there alone. So, highly recommend that as an option. There are other places as well. Maybe I'll add like a little list, because I did look up an article that lists the top safest places for women to visit alone. That is all I have for you today.